Does Luke want to have lunch with Scott?
No, that's not why Luke doesn't want to have a lunch with Scott.
No, that's not what he wants. Luke doesn't want to have lunch with Scott. What does Luke want?
You want to meet with Scott?
Luke wants to meet with Scott. Does Luke want to borrow money from Scott?
Luke doesn't want to borrow money from Scott.
No, Luke doesn't want to borrow money from Scott. What does Luke want?
Luke wants to meet with Scott.
Luke wants to meet with Scott. Does Luke want to have a meeting with Scott?
Yes, yeah, correct. Luke want to meet with Scott.
Yes, that's correct.
Luke
wants to meet with Scott, which is the same thing as saying that Luke wants to have a meeting with Scott. To meet with someone means to have a meeting with someone. Does Luke think the meeting will last all day?
No, Luke doesn't want. Luke doesn't think the meeting will last all day.
Luke doesn't think the meeting will last all day. How long does he think the meeting will last?
He thinks the meeting will last about 3 hours.
He thinks the meeting will last about 3 hours. Does he think the meeting will last more than 4 hours?
No, he doesn't think the meeting
he doesn't think the meeting will last more than 4 hours. How long does he think the meeting will last?
He thinks the meeting will last about 3 hours.
He thinks the meeting will last about 3 hours. Does Scott have time for meetings this week?
No, Scott doesn't have time for meetings this week. He's very busy.
No, Scott doesn't have time for meetings this week. He's very busy.
Scott is very busy.
Is Scott a little busy or very busy this week? Scott is very busy this week. Will the meeting between Luke and Scott take place this week?
No, the meeting between Luke and Scott will not take place this week.
No, the meeting between Luke and Scott will not take place this week. When will the meeting take place?
The meeting will take place next week.
The meeting will take place next week. Is it true that the meeting will take place next week instead of this week?
Yes, it's true. The meeting will take place next week instead of this week.
Yes, it's true. The meeting will take place next week instead of this week. Why will the meeting take place next week instead of this week?
Well, the meeting will take place next week instead of this week because Scott is very busy.
The meeting will take place next week instead of this week because Scott is very busy this week. Now, let's help Luke and Scott figure out the best day next week to set up their meeting. You're looking at the schedules for Luke and Scott for next week. I'm going to ask questions based on their schedules. Will Luke be in the office on Monday?
Yeah, he will.
Yes, he will. Luke will be in the office on Monday. What about Scott? Will Scott be in the office on Monday?
No, he won't. Scott won't be in the office on Monday.
Scott won't be in the office on Monday. Who won't be in the office on Monday?
It's Scott who won't.
It's Scott. Scott won't be in the office on Monday. Is it true that Scott will be absent from work on Monday?
Yes, that's true. Scott will.
Yes, that's true. Scott will be absent from work on Monday. Can they set up their meeting on Monday?
No, they cannot set up
their meeting on Monday. Why can't they set up their meeting on Monday?
Well, they can set up their meeting on Monday.
Well, they can't set up their meeting on Monday because Scott won't be in the office. He'll be on vacation.
He will be on.
Will Luke be on vacation next week?
No, Luke won't be.
No, Luke won't be on vacation next week. Who will be on vacation?
4 phút 20